Sorry, I was muted there. So, welcome everyone. A quick introduction to our interactive virtual field trips. If this is your first experience with the Learn Around the World GEOshow, this is an interactive experience. That means you can send in your questions if you're on or off camera with us today, and you can do that via text. And I'll control your audio for our guest classroom, so please leave it on mute for now. As well as everyone out there that are sending in questions, you can send in questions via the Q&A app built right into your Zoom window, or you can use hashtag GeoShow if you are a user of Twitter. Now, I'll only follow the hashtag GeoShow. So if you use my Twitter handle, I will not see your questions. We also use Kahoot right here on the show. This game pin is wrong, but today's game pin is 3509432. That's in your chat boxes. And if you win today's Geo quiz at the end of the show, you'll get to win a postcard from me from the Learn Around the World studios. Also, if you stump me on any questions today, then I will research those answers and post them to flipgrid.com/GeoShow. But we're ready to get started today. So GeoShow is now live. Let's do it, guys. All right. Welcome, all explorers. You're now watching the GeoShow, and the title of today's program is Magnificent Monarchs. Brought to you by Learn Around the World, bringing you guest speakers and virtual field trips just like this one from around the globe. All right, we're going to kick off today's show with a survey question. So if you're playing along, go ahead and get logged in at kahoot.it. That game pin today is 3509432. Another reminder, if you're on camera with us today, please do not unmute yourself. I will control your audio for you. All right, for everyone else out there, we're going to use Kahoot to start. And again, the first couple of questions are survey questions. They're for practice. So if you're not logged in yet, don't worry. And you'll have the opportunity to do so before we start awarding points later on in the show. But we're kicking off today's show with our first survey question over on Kahoot. The game must go on, or the show must go on. So we'll go ahead and play with our one contestant so far. Go ahead and get logged in if you're playing along. Where does the North American monarch butterfly go during the winter time? Where do they go? Is it red, California, blue, Florida, yellow, Mexico, or green, all of these places? All right, great. So if you chose, I won't go ahead and say this. So if you chose Mexico, that's where the majority of them go. And that's the location that we're going to talk about today. But they actually go to all of these places. Some of them go to Florida. If they're west of the Rocky Mountains, we call those the Western monarch butterfly. They're going to overwinter in California on the coast. And if they're an Eastern monarch butterfly, so that means they're found on the East Coast, east of the Rocky Mountains in Canada or the USA, they are going to migrate down. Most of them are going to migrate down to Mexico. And the Geo Show is a geography-based show, so that means location matters. So let's find out where we're going on today's virtual field trips. And so we are
this week
going to our closest neighbor to the south if you are watching from the USA, or we're coming to your country for a classroom watching from Mexico today. We're going to central Mexico because the monarch butterflies overwinter in a very small location in central Mexico. So as we zoom in here, they go to typically one of 8 to 11 overwintering sites. And I have these overwintering sites marked on the map for you. They're little butterflies. So those butterflies that you see, these are the locations of the traditional overwintering sites. Typically is 8 to 11 of these. It depends how many butterflies come. We'll learn later on in the show how many butterflies came this winter to Mexico. Mexico, just like the U.S., has states, and all of these overwintering sites are found in the state of Mexico and the state of Michoacan, highlighted in orange. Now, the majority of them, about 80% of all the butterflies that come to Mexico, are going to overwinter in one of these locations right in the center in Michoacan. So most of them go to the state of Michoacan, not the state of Mexico. And why are they coming to Mexico? Well, we'll talk about it later, but what's really appealing to the monarchs in about these particular sites is they're located along the Transvolcanic Belt. So this is a mountain range in central Mexico, and it provides just the right amount of moisture, just the right temperature for them to overwinter during the winter. So they're not really doing anything in Mexico. They're just hanging out in the trees. They're not eating. They're not drinking. Well, they do drink, but from the moisture in the air. And but they're not going out. They're not mating. They're not doing anything. We'll see what they do. But this is the location where they're at, and they actually have left this location, and they're actually traveling north as we speak. So we're going to go ahead and introduce our guest classroom we have with us today and give a couple of shout outs. So our first shout out today is going to General Brown Central Schools in New York. So welcome to everyone watching from New York today. Well, we only have one classroom here with us. There's a big snowstorm hitting the East Coast today in the USA and yesterday. And so lots of kids are on a snow day today. But we do have a classroom, Mrs. Lopez's third graders from Monterrey, Mexico. Welcome to the show, guys. All right, and I know we were a late addition. If you have a fun fact, share it, or just let me know. Have you guys seen any Monarchs recently? Yes. Okay, awesome. So they have left where we're going to see today. They're starting to leave the overwintering sites. They're actually traveling right by our friends in Monterrey. So definitely say hello to the Monarchs on the way north to come back to the U.S. and Canada. All right, so we're going to go ahead and kick off today's show with talking about that migration. Why do they migrate, and what happens during that migration? Before we do, we'll give another random shout out to St. Thomas the Apostle School in Illinois. Shout out to everyone in Illinois watching today. All right, so when we talk about, before we go to Mexico virtually and see the overwintering sites, we need to talk about the migration. So why are they migrating? And why is this so special? It's truly one of the greatest migrations on the planet. And to do that, we need to talk about the life cycle of the monarch butterfly. So I separate these into two. There's typically, it can be a little bit more, a little bit less, but there's around 5 generations of monarchs a year. Anywhere between 5 to 6, typically. And about 4 of those 5 will be on a normal life cycle, is what I call it. And one of those is going to be a very special generation, and that's the one that migrates. So that's the migrating monarch butterfly. So let's look at the difference between the two. Well, both of them have 4 stages of the life cycle. How many stages in the life cycle of a monarch? 4. All right. So just like any other insect, they have 4 life stages, and they are the egg, larva, pupa, and adult stage. So the first stage is the egg. Monarch butterflies lay somewhere around 300 eggs at a time. They're really small. They're about the size of a pinhead, and they typically lay them on the bottom of milkweed leaves. Is a great place to find monarch eggs. We'll talk about why that's important later, but they're an egg for about 3 to 4 days, and then they hatch into the larva stage, and the larva stage of a butterfly we call a caterpillar. So they're going to be a caterpillar for about 10 to 14 days. It can be a little bit longer or a little bit less. It just depends on each little monarch. They're all special. And their whole job as a caterpillar is just to eat, and eat. They eat a ton of food as a caterpillar. They'll grow over 5,000% from when they hatch to when they are ready to enter the next stage, which is the pupa stage, and it is called a chrysalis. So if you forget everything I tell you today, I want everyone to remember this. Monarchs do not make cocoons. Monarchs do not make what? Cocoons, right? They make what's called a chrysalis. Can you guys say chrysalis? Chrysalis. Okay, so a chrysalis is the next stage. They're going to be a chrysalis in the chrysalis stage for 10 to 14 days. Sometimes it's more. I've read where people have had their monarchs in a chrysalis stage for up to 28 days. The one I raised that you see the picture of here was only in the chrysalis for about 10 days, almost exactly 10 days. And the last stage is the adult monarch butterfly. Or in the adult stage, we call it the butterfly. And this is where they separate. This is where it's different. So the typical 4 generations of butterflies are going to only live 2 to 6 weeks is their lifespan, so not very long. But when it's the migrating generation, so typically at the end of September or August, early August, these butterflies that become adults, they're going to stop mating and they're going to live for the next 9 months. So the monarchs that our friends in Monterrey, Mexico, just saw, those monarchs, they have been living for the past 9 months. They have not been mating or laying eggs. So when they stop laying and mating, laying eggs and mating, they go south. And this is the eastern monarch, of course. So if we look at all the monarchs across North America, throughout Canada and the northern parts of the United States, most of them will go to Mexico. So we call these the eastern monarch. The western monarch goes to California. Why is that? Well, it's because of a big mountain range, the Rocky Mountains. So if the monarchs over here, the western monarchs, are going to California and the eastern monarchs are going to Mexico, most of them. And as they leave in late September, early August, they start flying south. Now, some of them will trickle into Florida. So there is a population in Florida that will make its way down there. But because of the Rocky Mountains and the Gulf of Mexico, all of the monarchs get funneled right down past Monterrey and down into central Mexico, into the state of Mexico and the state of Michoacan. Now, all winter, they're just hanging out in the trees, not doing much at all. And then typically around 1st of March, mid-March, they start traveling north, which our friends in Mexico told us. They saw them with their own eyes. They are definitely headed north, guys. That's exciting. Now, they're going to stop and lay their eggs. They're going to mate and lay their eggs somewhere around northern Mexico or Texas is typically where they lay their eggs. And this migrating butterfly is going to die. And their children, once they go from egg to caterpillar to chrysalis to adult butterfly, they will fly north for 2 to 6 weeks. They'll mate, they'll lay their eggs. We go from egg to caterpillar to chrysalis to adult butterfly. They go north for 2 to 6 weeks. That whole process continues throughout the summer until next September or August when they start heading south. Now, this is the latest sightings, and right down here in Monterey, they just told us they saw them, but all of these white spots that you see, these are the latest monarch sightings that are traveling north and over the past week or so. This map's going to be updated over at learner.org. You can follow along at Journey North is a great program. You guys can get involved with your classrooms and be little citizen scientists. How cool is that? So I wanted to know, why do they migrate? So they do one of the largest insect migrations on the planet. Some of them are traveling over 5,000 miles from Canada to Mexico. But why do they do this? Well, I contacted an expert at the University of Minnesota at the Monarch Lab, and this is what she had to say.
Migrate because they are a tropical butterfly. They can't survive the winter here, and their food source can't survive the winter either. So milkweed goes dormant for the winter months. It's not growing, it's not green, and it's just got fluffs of seed pods floating all over the place to germinate again in the spring. So they migrate south because they don't have a food source. But we're not really sure why it is that they don't just fly south to where there is a food source, and why it is that they fly south to basically spend the winter hanging out in the trees, because they don't drink anything and they're not breeding or laying eggs for those winter months.
All right. So if you were listening closely, you heard that they need milkweed. So milkweed goes dormant. So this is what milkweed looks like when it first starts to grow in the springtime. And it's dormant in the winter. That means it's not growing in the wintertime. So when spring comes, it starts to sprout up all over the place where milkweed grows. There's all kinds of different milkweed that grow across the United States and Canada and Mexico. This is the kind that grows in the northeastern part of the United States. It has typically, most milkweed has a fuzzy underleaf on it. When you break a limb off or a stem, then it secretes or lets out a white milky liquid. This is where it gets its nickname from, milkweed. So it looks just like milk, right, guys? And these caterpillars, they really love milkweed. In fact, it's the only food that they will eat. Monarch caterpillars only eat milkweed. Monarch caterpillars only eat milkweed. That means if you don't have milkweed, you don't have monarchs. Okay, guys? So remember that. If you don't have milkweed, we will not have monarchs, because that means the caterpillars will have no food. So milkweed is extremely important for growing if we want to help monarch butterflies. Now, the adults, they're a little bit different. So they will drink flower, they'll drink nectar from any flower. So what's really important for our migrating butterflies, the ones that are traveling south to Mexico, remember they travel to Mexico in the fall time, it's very important in our butterfly gardens at school, around our communities, that we plant flowers or plants that flower in late summer and early fall, because the monarchs, they build up fat on the way to Mexico. They don't eat the entire winter. So they need lots of nectar on the way to Mexico, and through northern Mexico, so they can make it through the winter time. Okay, and that is a rundown of what they eat. And again, this is milkweed right before it goes dormant. They grow these seed pods and they turn brown and yellow and they die. They go dormant for the winter time. And right before they die and completely disappear, they release their seeds from their seed pods. So here's one of the seed pods to the left. There we go. And I'll go a little bit over here. I found one that was releasing. Here we go. So as we can see, it kind of looks like a dandelion. So when you blow a dandelion, their seeds, they blow in the wind. We call this seed dispersal. The milkweed has the same technique. It has the same adaptation for reproducing. It uses the wind to disperse its seeds. And that's what it looks like right before it goes dormant for the winter time. All right, so we're going to open up the floor for some questions before we go to Mexico and look at one of these overwintering sites. So we just learned about the life cycle of the monarch and the migration. Why they're migrating is because, remember, the milkweed goes dormant. The milkweed goes dormant. So there's no milkweed in Michigan or Wisconsin or Canada during the winter time. Okay, so we're going to start off with our classroom in Monterrey in Mexico. Do you guys have a question for us?
How much does the monarch weigh? How much a monarch weighs?
Can you repeat that a little bit louder for me?
Yes, he's asking what is the weight of the monarch butterflies.
Oh, what is the weight? Great. It's 0.25 to 0.75 grams. Okay. So that is in the US, I can tell you a US dime, so a US coin, 10 cents, weighs 2.3 grams. So monarch butterfly is a lot less, is about a third less of a US dime. So maybe in Mexico, maybe the 1 or the 5 peso, I don't know, whatever, it would be really small. Or about the size of a paper clip, about the weight of a paper clip, I would say, is about the weight of a monarch butterfly. So they're really, really light. Great question. Again, a reminder for everyone out there, if you're watching, we have lots of classrooms watching. Please send in your questions using the Q&A app or hashtag GeoShow on Twitter if you want your questions answered live right here on the show. Since I don't see any coming in yet, let's go back to Mexico. Let's do another question from you guys.
How fast do the migration advance?
How fast is the migration?
Advance. How fast do they go in the migration time?
Right. So it's going to be, it depends. I know this is a bad answer, but it depends where they're coming from, right? So if they're coming from, say, Kansas in the US, they're going to make it to Mexico before the monarchs coming from Canada. But typically they leave Canada in late September, and typically, traditionally, they're arriving in Michoacan by November 1st. Traditionally, they're there before Dia de los Muertos. And it's very important to the people in Michoacan that they're there. And if they're late, it's seen as bad luck, and it's not a good sign, which happened this last year. They were late because of the weather. It was really warm last fall in Canada and the U.S. So we have some questions coming in on our Q&A app. Mrs. Benedict's classroom wants to know, why are they called butterflies. I don't know the origin of the name butterfly, who named the insect. I do know why they're called monarchs. I'm going to hold on to it just for a minute. I'm going to come back to it because I'm going to show you. That's one of our questions coming up. And also, Mrs. Robinson's classroom wants to know, how much can a butterfly eat? Well, I don't know the full weight. I can tell you more so because I don't follow butterflies around. They're really hard to track and follow around. But the caterpillar stage, the larvae stage, when I was raising my monarch butterfly last summer, then they ate a ton of milkweed. Probably I had probably 4 or 5 little shoots of milkweed in my aquarium, and they ate a lot of milkweed. Just one caterpillar can eat a lot of milkweed. Great question coming from there. And how high can they fly on their migration? That's a great question. They can go up to 2 miles high, and part of coming down to Mexico, they're riding the wind much of the time. And a lot of times with the migration, monarch butterflies can't fly when it's too cold. So it needs to be over 50 degrees Fahrenheit or in sunny, or if it's cloudy, it needs to be over 60 degrees Fahrenheit. And then also, if it's raining, they don't fly. So it needs to be dry, and it needs to be warm enough for them to fly. So in bad weather, they're not flying. So sometimes if there's a lot of storms on the way, that can slow down the migration as well. And so the biggest number that I can find in one day, one of the ways that we track monarchs is we tag them. This is a great project that you can do with your class next year in the fall, is tag them on the way to Mexico. So these are little tags you put on their wings, and when someone finds them, they call the number, and you can go to monarchwatch.org. It's a great citizen science project. It's really fun to do. And the longest migration, or the longest distance I found in one day, was 265 miles, that a tagged monarch was found the very next day, 265 miles later. That's a pretty large jump for one day. That monarch butterfly was probably riding some really good wind. There we go. So before we jump into our next section, a couple of questions. I kind of tend to look at the Q&A app more, but over on the chat, let's see, how do you grow milkweed? Milkweed is a weed. It naturally grows. The number one thing we can do is not kill milkweed. So that's what's really hurting monarchs as far as milkweed goes, is our farming practices and what we do in our gardens. If we're going to kill the milkweed in our vegetable gardens, then it's important to our monarchs that we at least plant some milkweed in a butterfly garden. So we make a whole garden just for our monarchs. That way we have some milkweed for them, is a really good idea, or good thing to do. And you can ask your local, go to your local greenhouse. You can often get milkweed from them. There's organizations like the Monarch Lab and monarchwatch.org. They'll actually send you free milkweed. So the milkweed that grows best in your area. So you can contact these organizations. They'll send your classroom milkweed, and then you can start your own butterfly garden. How cool is that? That's really awesome. Okay, so we're going to jump in and travel down to Mexico and to central Mexico and see where have they been over the winter. So where have our little monarch friends been? And let's go down to the overwintering sites and see what it's like. Remember, they go to one of these 11 sites in central Mexico, and sometimes there's 11 sites, sometimes there's less than that. And each one of these sites, all of the butterflies there, we call them a colony. So they're different colonies. And the colony that we're going to go to today, as we learned in the introduction, is we're going to go to one in the state of Mexico. So remember, most of them go to the state of Michoacan, but because on our expedition when we were there, we were in Mexico City, and it was easier to get to these overwintering sites. So we went to the site of Piedra Dorada, and when you go to these overwintering sites, the monarch butterflies typically roost. We'll learn that word here in a minute. But the colonies usually hang out on the south side of the mountains. Why are they on the south side of the mountains? That's because sunlight in the northern hemisphere, the sun is to the south of us. And so they get more sunlight when they roost on the south side of the mountains. And so that's where we're going to do. We're going to go to this mountain, and we're going to hike up and look at the colony at the Piedra Dorada site. And we're going to leave Mexico City virtually, of course, and on a magic school bus. So let's do it. So as we leave Mexico City, let's go down to the ground, abracadabra. So as we're traveling, you can get an idea about this area by looking at the trees. We're down at the trailhead before hiking up. If you look across the streets, you'll notice it's mostly pine trees. So this is predominantly a pine forest. And this is important to talk about. If you see all the people that are here, the monarch butterflies are very important to the economy, the local economy. So many people come here and to support or to see the monarchs. And when they do that, they support the local economy. See all these cars, there's tour buses, people come here to spend money. Local people bring food from their home. We can see some people over here to the right that brought their coolers up. And so you can buy tamales, tacos, tortas, all kinds of delicious home-cooked food. And so that helps the local economy. And animals, so you can choose to hike up on your own 2 feet, or you can ride a horse up. And I know most of you probably like to ride horses, maybe. So we decided to take a horse up. And the good thing about virtual field trips is all of us can get on one horse. When I go back, I don't know if I'm going to do a horse again, because when you look at these switchbacks on the trail, they're kind of high, right? And then you're like up another 5 or 6 feet up on a horse. So it's kind of scary. And, you know, I was carrying a lot of heavy camera equipment, which was nice on the horse, but it made me really unstable. And so, but you can only ride the horses up so far. So you do have to walk once you get up a certain distance into the trail. Now, I like to point this out because no matter where we're hiking, if it's in Mexico, the USA, Canada, anywhere, whenever we go in the outdoors, we like to follow a set of principles to help protect our forest. We call them leave no trace. And that means when we go somewhere in the outdoors, we want to only take pictures and leave only footprints. And the way that we leave the least amount of footprints is we stay on the trail. So it's not a good idea to go off trail because what you do is you end up killing a lot of plants and the vegetation. And especially when you have really popular trails that bring lots of people to come see monarch butterflies. As you can see, hiking up, there's lots and lots of people here. And what's that? What do we see already? We see a monarch butterfly. So before we start we're getting closer to the colony now. And just to show you a couple of up close pictures and talk about why they get their name. This is the site, the specific overwintering site that we are at in the state of Mexico. And when we look at our monarch butterflies, they have this beautiful orange color. So we're going to talk about why the monarch butterflies get their name. And I'll tell you, their name, the name monarch in English, is another name for a king or a queen. So for example, if they're in Europe at the time, when Europeans started coming to the Americas, many of the countries had kings and queens. In other words, they had monarchs. And the monarch butterfly was named after one of these countries' monarchs. So our next question over on Kahoots, if you're playing along, don't forget that game pin today is at the bottom left of your screen. Is 350-9432. 350-9432. And my next question for all of you is going to be, whose monarch was the monarch butterfly named after? All right, was it named after the monarch of red Italy, blue France, yellow England, or green Spain? All right, so the monarch butterfly was named after the monarch of England, specifically King William III. He was originally from Holland. Holland, if you've ever seen the World Cup, their country colors is orange. And so his nickname was the Prince of Orange. And so when Europeans came to the New World and they saw this beautiful orange monarch butterfly. They said, that looks like our monarch, or that's an orange butterfly. Our monarch is called the Prince of Orange. Then we're going to name this the monarch butterfly. So that's how it gets its common name, the monarch butterfly. And when we look at this monarch, another reason or another important thing that we can tell about the coloration is that it has a very bright orange color. And why do you think it might have a very bright orange color? Do we have anyone over in our classroom, in Mrs. Lopez's classroom? Do you have any guesses? Why do you think it's a bright color?
Why do you think that they have that bright color? Why? Why do you think that the butterflies have that bright color? Why? I mean,
any guesses?
Do you think why? Somebody, come to the camera. Why? Shouting why? Maybe because so everyone can see the butterfly.
Right. So it is a tropical butterfly, even though it spends the summertime up north. But another reason that it maybe has a bright color is many times in the animal kingdom, animals that are poisonous are really brightly colored. It's kind of a warning sign. And the monarch butterfly, if you did not know this, they are poisonous. And what's really unique is they're not poisonous from themselves. They do not make poison. Instead, they eat milkweed, and milkweed is poisonous. Milkweed is a poisonous plant. So the toxins they eat as a caterpillar stays inside that caterpillar, and then it transforms inside of the chrysalis into an adult butterfly, and it still has those toxins in its exoskeleton. All right, so when we look at the monarch butterfly and we see that beautiful orange color, and we're going to go up to the colony now, we're going to start walking through the colony. We're going to see thousands and thousands of monarch butterflies. And I want you to notice when they open their wings, there's so many of them together that they can turn the entire forest orange. Okay, as we keep hiking up, we're starting to get to the colony. As soon as you get to the edge of the colony, you start to see butterflies flying around. You see them all over the ground. Remember, when the sun goes in the clouds in early March in Mexico, up in the mountains, it can be still quite chilly. So if they fall to the ground and the sun goes behind the clouds, they need to wait for the sun to come back out before they can fly back into the trees. If you look here, this butterfly right here, this monarch, has part of its wing missing. Why is that? Well, we don't really know, but we can make an educated guess, right? Maybe it got hit by a car. Maybe it got attacked by an animal and they took a bite out of the wing. And remember, they are poisonous. So it said, puh, puh, I don't want to eat this butterfly. It tastes bad. And so, so maybe that's what happened to it. So watch your step, guys, as we walk around. We don't want to kill any monarchs if we don't have to. You can see they crawl all over you from the ground. They'll crawl on your legs. There's so many of them around. When we look across the forest, does anyone see anything in the trees across the forest? Do you guys see anything over here? All right, so we have some monarch butterflies in the trees. Our classroom in Monterey is heading out, so thanks for coming along with us this far. And as you notice, the trees, there's so many monarchs on them that the trees are hanging down on these pine trees. And we'll go back to that when we look at the trees. Let's go under the trees and get closer. When we look up at these clusters, when the sun comes out, you just start to see the monarchs flying around everywhere. And when we look at these trees a little bit more closely, we even see they're not only on the limbs, but they're also covering the trunks of the trees. Look at this tree trunk right here, guys. So right here to the right, I cannot even see tree bark. There's so many monarch butterflies on that tree. Now, monarch butterflies, when they are at the overwintering sites all winter, they communicate by opening and closing their wings, and they are just grappling on or gripping to the branches, and they do that with one of their 6 legs. They are insects, so they have 6 legs. And when we look at their coloration, the males tend to be a little bit darker. I'll show you the difference, how to tell the males from the females in a couple of minutes. And another way they communicate was with pheromones, with chemicals. And so that's another way they communicate with one another as well. And what are they? I often get asked, what are they doing at the overwintering sites? So they're a little more active right now because they're starting to mate and they're traveling north. They're starting their journey back north. Now, when they're here in Mexico, they're roosting in the trees is what we say. It's a verb. It's actually a noun too. So you can have a roost of monarch butterflies. And what are they doing? They're roosting in the trees. So lots of people, again, it's hard to make your way through the forest because there's so many people that come here to see the monarch butterflies. There's scientists that come here that collect data every year. They count all of the eastern monarch butterflies. I'll show you how they do that in a few minutes. And I'm going to go ahead and turn up the volume here. I want everyone to look at the sky. You can see it's blue skies up there. And take a look at these two beautiful monarchs. Now, everyone be quiet in your classroom and just really listen. Point your ears. You may have to cup your hand behind your ears so you can hear really, really well. But point your ears towards the speakers and listen to the sound of what it sounds like to have thousands and thousands and thousands of monarch butterflies all flying around you at the same time.
Rápido. Mira, Gaby, nos estamos viendo.
All right. So as you can hear, it's hard to hear one butterfly flapping their wings, but when you have thousands of them flapping their wings. Okay, so down in the overwintering sites, these very large groups of monarchs, this is one small part of the forest. I couldn't get the whole forest, but this whole site, they're called a colony. They're called a colony. So at each of these colonies, what are they doing when they're in the colonies in Mexico? They are roosting in the trees. What are they doing? Right. They are roosting in the trees. And so when we take a look at our monarchs in the trees while they're roosting, there's so many of them together. When they open their wings, they can turn the entire forest orange. You guys can do a quick Google search on images. Just look for overwintering sites like aerial photos or type something like that in. And I did not have a helicopter when I was there, so I don't have any personal pictures of it. But there are pictures on the internet where you can see the whole forest just turns orange. So you can see from the sky where these colonies are because the green forest turns orange. And look at this one limb. How many monarchs are on this one limb? I have no idea. Is it 100? Is it 1,000? Is it 10,000? We can't possibly count them one by one at the overwintering sites. It's just too many to do that. And they move around a lot when they're down here. But when they start flying around, of course. But every winter is a great opportunity to count the eastern monarch butterflies. And I'll show you how they count them in just a minute, but we do want to start answering some questions. How do they defend themselves from predators? So they are poisonous. They only have two predators. It's coming from Mrs. Boyer's class, or Mr. Boyer, sorry. So they have two types of predators. There's two birds that prey upon, or that predate upon them, I should say. And so there is a goose and an oriole. And it's really cool how they figured out how to do this. So can you guys say exoskeleton? Right, exoskeleton. So insects have an exoskeleton, not an inside skeleton like we do. So their hard part of their body is on the outside. I like to think of Iron Man, right? So Iron Man is hard on the outside. It's kind of like an exoskeleton. Well, they keep their toxins from that milkweed that they eat. Those toxins are primarily in the exoskeleton. So these two birds have figured out how to kind of split open the abdomen, and they only eat out the insides of the monarch butterfly. So they're able to, they have a great adaptation, a behavioral adaptation to eat them. Okay, let's see. Can Mr. Boyer's classroom wants to know, can they survive without milkweed? No, not the species, because an adult can, because they can drink nectar from any flower. But when they lay their eggs, the caterpillars are going to die if they do not have milkweed. Let's see. Also coming in, Mrs. Robinson classroom wants to know, how do they get to Mexico, or how do they know where they go? So they use something called a sun compass, So we know basically how they go south. And remember, they get funneled by the Gulf of Mexico and the Rocky Mountains. It kind of funnels them right down. If you look over my head, right here, it kind of funnels them right down into central Mexico. But we don't really know how they find these overwintering sites. Like, why do they go back to these same overwintering sites 5 generations later? It's not like you can tell the other monarch butterflies that are on the way, because the last migrators are already dead, so they don't know. And so how do they make it there? We don't fully understand, but I can show you how the sun compass works. They can tell that they're going south by using a sun compass. And the way that a sun compass works is they use the sun. So we know that the sun comes up and sets. The sun comes up in the east and sets in the west. And this is going to look like I'm drawing this backwards, but this is going to be the east and this is going to be west, because they're flying south. They're flying south. And so if the monarch is flying south from Canada to Mexico, when the sun's coming up on the east, it will be on the left side of the monarch butterfly. So it knows in the morning hours that the sun should stay on the left side of its body. In the afternoon hours, it knows to keep the sun on the right side of its body. And this is called a sun compass. So this is how it tells. What's really interesting about monarch butterflies, and this is all butterflies, in fact, butterflies see the largest spectrum of color than any other animal on the planet. So I don't know if monarchs can see more colors than any other type of butterfly, but I just know butterflies in general, they can see UV light. We can't see that light, but they can. And so they can see all these different kinds of lights, and they use that information. So they use the sun as the compass for them. Great question. We also have some questions coming in from Mrs. Mayner's classroom. If you touch a monarch butterfly, will it be harmed since they are poisonous? No. So it's not like a poison dart frog that the poison is on their skin that will get on your skin, or like poison ivy when you touch it. So it's different. Instead, it's in their exoskeleton. So you would actually have to consume the monarch butterfly. In fact, what makes monarch butterflies, one of the reasons that makes them so fantastic to study, to talk about in school and class, is because they are really a durable butterfly. Most butterflies, so they have scales. Most butterflies, their scales are really fragile on their wings. So if you ever heard, don't touch a butterfly, or like let them land on you, but don't grab them. Well, it's not really true with the monarch. The monarch, we can grab them softly, don't squeeze them, but you can catch a monarch butterfly with your hands, and you can put tags on their wings relatively safely, because they are pretty durable. And I think one of the reasons is because they do this great migration. So they have a really, one of their adaptations is to be really durable and not as fragile as some other butterflies. Great questions coming in there. Okay, so I do want to, before we launch our Geo quiz, I wanted to show you how to tell the difference between boys and girls, and show you how they count them really quick. The monarch butterfly is not, or is it, doing well? I don't know. We'll see what you guys think. But when we look at the monarch butterfly, let me show you really quickly how to tell if it's a boy or a girl. So in your classroom, you can look around and make sure your neighbors aren't cheating. But what do you guys think? Raise your hand if you think this monarch is a boy. Look around at your classmates. Now, raise your hand if you think this monarch is a girl. Look around at your classmates. Okay, so you guys have to keep each other in check now. So here's how you tell the difference between boy and girl monarch butterfly. So these two are a male and female monarch butterfly. The female is right here on the left, and the male is on the right. So on the last picture, if you said female, looks like this one, you are correct, or you were correct, I should say. So here's how you tell the difference between the two. One, the male is a little bit darker orange. We also see these lines, these black veins going through their wings. On the female, they're wider. I like to say they're magic marker or Sharpie thick. And on the male, they're really thin, kind of like pencil thin lines. And probably the best way to tell the difference between the two, though, that I like to use is I just look for these two black spots, and you see how they're on the male, but they're not on the female. Yeah. So if you find those black spots, it's a male. And if they're not there, it's a female. That's the quickest, easiest way to tell the difference between boys and girl monarchs. It's our last survey question for the day. So our quiz is coming up after. So all questions will be worth points after this one. So make sure you get logged in over at Kahoot. Today's game pin is 350-9432. And our last survey question of the day is going to be, do we have a healthy population of eastern monarchs? What do you guys think? Yes or no? Do we have a healthy population? Okay, we're saying yes. All right, hold that thought and let's check it out. So how do they count these monarchs? We know it's impossible to go count them one by one, right? So how do scientists count monarchs when they're in Mexico? They do this every single year, or they have been since 1994. So if we go and we look at the data since 1994, first, let me show you how they count them, and then we'll look at the data. So what they do is they walk around the colony and they flag every tree on the outside, the perimeter that has monarch butterflies, and they take a math measurement. And for our younger classrooms, you can ask your teachers about this later, but the inside of a shape is called the area. So when you take a measurement of all the inside of a shape, it's called the area. So in this case, it would be the area of the oval if you took a measurement of it. And what measurements are they taking in area? There's different measurements of area, but the one that they use is called hectare. So what is a hectare? 1 hectare is roughly 2.5 acres. If that means nothing to you, that's okay. The easiest way to remember it is 2.5 American-sized football fields. So this would be about the size of 1 hectare. So what in the world does that mean? So that means if you have trees in the forest about the size of 2.5 American football fields that are filled up with monarch butterflies, today, scientists estimate that that is around 50 million monarchs. So if you have 2 hectares, for example, you would have 100 million monarchs. If you had 4, you would have 200 million monarchs. And that is an estimate. And just to show you, again, this is an estimate. The estimate used to be 10 million. Today, they have a little bit better idea. That number could change in the future. So, it's not an exact science. When we look at the data since 1994, what do you guys think? Are the monarchs doing well or are they hurting? Well, if we look at this year, 2017, 2018, the winter of 2017-18, they declined 15% from last year. Overall, since 1994, the entire population has been decreasing. So they're really not doing that well. When we look at it, most scientists agree that we need about 6 hectares of monarch butterflies. So right where this line is, we need about 6 hectares of monarch butterflies roosting in Mexico to be a healthy population. So as you can see, we are under that line, and we've been under that line since 2007, or on average, really since the late 90s, we've been under that mark of 6 hectares. And so when we look at it this year, we had about 2.5 hectares. So that's times 50 million. So what's that? 100 million, 150 million total monarchs that are heading back north sometime soon. We hit a really low point in 2013, and a really high point since they've been taking measurements was at over 18 hectares back in 1996. Okay, so they're not doing well. So what does that mean? What can you guys do? As you learned today, the number one thing you guys can do is plant milkweed. There are things with climate change that are affecting them. We can't, it's hard for us as a classroom. That's something the world needs to work on, but it's hard for us as a classroom. But what can you do as individuals and individual classrooms is we can plant milkweed, because as we learned today, milkweed, if we don't have it, we won't have our monarchs. So extremely important. All right, we're going to launch that survey, that Geo quiz. If you win today's Geo quiz, you'll win a postcard from me, GeoB from the Learn Around the World studio. Good luck, explorers. Okay, first question coming up. The majority of the migrating monarchs migrate, or they go to which Mexican state? Michoacan, state of Mexico, state of Huachul, or the state of Chihuahua? All right, it was the state of Michoacan. Great job. Hero Lion takes the lead. Do all monarchs go to Mexico? Do all monarchs go to Mexico? Red, yes, or blue, no? All right, no. So remember, some of them go to Florida and some of them go to California, but most of them do go to Mexico. It's just not all. Hero Lion still in the lead. Great job. What is the only food source of the monarch caterpillar? Is it red smaller insects, blue milkweed, yellow flowers, or green dandelions? All right, it is milkweed. Hero Lion still in the lead. And what do the monarchs do at the overwintering sites? Do they roost in trees, eat in the trees, dance in the trees, or sleep in the trees? All right, they do roost in the trees. Great job. Epic Bear, see if they can come back. When do monarchs migrate to Mexico? When do they go to Mexico? All right. All right, so they go in the fall. They go in the fall. So they spend the winter in Mexico, but they're migrating to Mexico in the fall. And today's winner is dun, 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 Hero Lion. Great job, Hero Lion. If you are Hero Lion's teacher, please send me your school address. And you can do that in one place and one place only. And that's over at learnaroundtheworld.com/prize. learnaroundtheworld.com/prize, located at the bottom of your screen right there. All right, everyone. So for everyone else that's around, we do have a couple classrooms still in here with us. So if you have a couple questions, I can, let's see, Mrs. Maynard's classroom. Let's see if you guys had any other remaining questions in here. All right, I don't see any from your classrooms. Let's see. Do the butterflies blend into the leaves of trees in the fall since they are orange like the leaves? Yeah, they would. If they were definitely in trees that were changing, they would definitely blend in with the trees a little bit. But typically they're ahead of the foliage. Not all the time, but typically they are. If they leave in September or early September, late August. But yeah, they definitely could blend in as well. We also have coming in, how do they know when to leave Mexico? That's a great question. They know to leave Mexico when the moisture drops and the temperature. So what happens is this area in Mexico is one of the reasons it's a good place for them to roost is it has a lot of moisture in the air. So they can get moisture from the air. They don't need to go drink water. And so what happens is it's at the end of the dry season. So there's dry season and a wet season. So it's getting to the wet season is about to begin, but it's extremely dry at the end of the dry season. The moisture levels are dropping. Then they have to start leaving the colonies. They go down in altitude. So they go down the mountain to find streams to get water from. And as typically, this is the time of year when it starts warming up. So they're starting to get more active. They start going out drinking water. They're starting to mate. Then they start heading north. And the majority of them, they have been seen in large numbers heading north from the overwintering sites this past week. So they are heading north right now. All right, that's going to do it for today. So thank you, everyone that came with us to Mexico on our virtual field trip to learn a little bit more about the monarch butterfly. Until next time, I'm GOB, and you've been watching the Geo Show. Keep exploring, guys. Bye.